I'm very excited to talk to you today about a subject that I've been passionate about for decades. In fact, it's a school I want to try to persuade you to go to, and it's the best school on the planet. It's called NYU. Maybe you've heard of it before. Mentor Yourself University. Let me tell you why I love Mentor Yourself University. It allows you to learn faster, go farther, and achieve more on your own and alongside of others than you ever could by attending any one particular mentoring program. In fact, let me make this big and bold statement. One mentor is not enough for your success. You're going to need different mentors at every stage of your life cycle in order to continue your journey towards success. For example, when I was in my 20s, early 20s, my focus was on sales, so most of my time was spent focused on mentors who were very good in sales. And then when I went into leadership, my focus became on learning from those who were great in leadership. When I became a speaker and an author and a writer and a coach, I started learning from mentors who are speakers, writers, authors, and coaches. You kind of get the idea. But one mentor isn't enough. And the reason I suggest you enroll in Mentor Yourself University is because nothing can slow you down then. You can make as much as fast as you can learn. You can learn as fast as you want to. You're only sitting in the classrooms that you create. And I'm going to talk to you about how to do that. A lot of people would want to sell you very long and involved mentoring programs. And if you love a classroom experience, if you love someone else being in control of your destiny, then maybe that's a good program. But if you like to move a little bit quicker, you like to make a little bit more, you like to learn a little bit faster, let me encourage you to enroll yourself in Mentor University. Let me tell you a quick story about the master mentor himself, Zig Ziglar. I had a great call a few weeks ago from my publisher with an invitation to do something that frankly was a dream come true that I had never dreamed before. It was one of those things that while you're on the phone, you're like, oh my gosh, is he really asking me to do this? Let me tell you what it was. Made for Success Publishing has just published the Zig Ziglar's Goals program. Now, you might say, wait a minute, I've heard of the Zig Ziglar Goals program, and you should have. It's one of the most successful goal setting programs on the planet, and it has been for a very long time. But what makes this particular program very different is that it's the first time ever a manuscript has been created from the actual seminar program that Zig Ziglar did live from the stage. And my publisher had just published the book, and he asked me if I would like to do the audiobook and record Zig's actual words. Imagine the thrill to be able to do something like that and partner with the master mentor himself. The reason that was so impactful for me is because when I was 20 years old, I went to a Zig Ziglar seminar for the first time. Now, I went to that seminar about 6 months after I'd gone into business. My business when I was 20 years old was selling advertising and media to people and decision makers who were twice and sometimes 3 times my age. I was still learning. I was what you call the unconscious incompetent. I didn't even know what I didn't know. Can you remember what you were like when you were 20? Maybe you're close to 20 now and you're just starting out as I was. Well, I went to this Zig Ziglar seminar hoping to learn from the master, but you know what I discovered? I discovered how much more I had to learn. Zig was talking about qualities of success, and as he did, I had this tape recorder. I was recording the whole thing, but I was also writing down all the different qualities he said that make up a successful person. I realized by the end of the seminar, I didn't have a lot of these, but I knew that if I started that day, eventually I could grow myself into a lot of them. And that's what Mentor Yourself University allows you to do. It allows you to grow yourself into them. Now, if you're wondering, my gosh, Scott, where's the pitch? What are you trying to sell me? I've got some bad news for you. There's nothing for you to buy in this program. There's nothing for you to buy but the potential that you have within yourself. Here's what I mean by that. There's nothing for you to buy into here except the idea of buying into the potential that already exists within inside of you. In my book, Persuade, the 7th chapter is called The Law of the Prospector. And the Law of the Prospector simply says this, that a sales maker develops the potential within them, and as they do, they discover the opportunities around them. That the higher you climb, the more you see. The more you grow yourself, the more opportunities materialize around you. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of very specific things you already have within inside of you. You don't have to look outside of you. You don't have to buy them. In fact, nobody can even give them to you. but they can be developed. They're muscles that exist within you already, and I'm going to teach you today how to turn on your learner. Because what you're about to learn, nobody can take away from you. And you can grow these muscles of learning and become an expert in a particular direction as much as you want to be or as little as you want. When I was just starting off, one of the giants in the motivational and speaking industry back then was a guy named Earl Nightingale. This is something that Earl said. He said that within 5 years, you could become a national expert if you spent an hour a day studying on a particular subject. That was many decades ago. Today, with information being ubiquitous and so much knowledge and wisdom experience being out there, you can become a national expert in less than a year. In fact, probably even in a lot shorter time if you learn to leverage something called the reticular activator system that already exists within inside of you. Like I said, you don't have to look anywhere. It already exists in there. Let's just say that it's part of your mainframe. It's part of what was installed in you at birth by God. The question is, have you located it? Have you developed it? Have you been able to turn it on? Because when you're able to turn it on, you're going to do what I call turning on your learner. Think of your learner as a stereo system. Remember the old stereos with the knobs? Once you turn the power on, you started to tune into a particular station so you could focus your receiver on picking up certain information. That's kind of what a reticular activator system does. It's basically the attention center of the brain. Let me give you an example of how it works. Have you ever heard somebody say, gosh, I just start thinking about something and then it just seems to happen? It's not mystery or magic, it's your reticular activator system. Have you ever heard somebody say before, I just bought this red car and I see all these red cars around me all the time. Or I just bought this new Infiniti sports car and I just realized, oh my gosh, everyone's got the same car. It's not mystery, it didn't just happen. But what's happened is that now that your mind has become focused in a certain direction, or it's become top of mind with you, your spirit, your eyes, your ears, and your heart has become sensitized to that particular thing that you're thinking on. Now, this exists within inside of all of you. You've all experienced this before, whether intentionally or accidentally, but imagine what could happen if you learn to intentionally turn on your reticular activator and tune into particular areas. This is what's at the heart of Mentor Yourself University, because frankly, until you learn to do this, you could spend tens of thousands of dollars learning from the greatest experts in the world. But if you don't learn how to pick up about what's being said, what's not being said, and everything else around you, you won't be able to maximize the wisdom that surrounds you throughout the universe right now. Speaking of tuning in, let me tell you an interesting story about a guy named Dale Machado. We call him Megawatt Machado. He's a chief engineer for iHeartRadio. Now imagine what an engineer does. They're the ones who keep a radio or TV station on the air. They're the ones that keep the gas tanks for the generator filled if the electricity goes out, so the radio or TV station can stay on. They're also the ones who ensure that you're seeing or hearing a great product. Now, their skill set's different than yours and mine. They've developed it over the years. They've honed it over the years. In fact, when they turn on the TV or an engineer turns on the radio, they hear things, frankly, you and I don't hear, because they've developed a trained ear for it. Your reticular activator is what's going to help you develop a trained ear, a trained eye, and a trained heart to pick up on all the information that you're particularly focused on. Again, your reticular activator is your attention center of the brain that funnels and filters all the information around you into meaningful and useful helps. Picture a neural net, and that's what your reticular activator is. It's a neural net that spans the universe, that once it's turned on and focused in a particular direction, even if it starts to pick up on signals and information and wisdom and advice, not focused on what you're focused on, it will filter those things, but then be able to mine the greatness out of that advice, mine the greatness out of the signals you're receiving to the point to where it becomes usable into the area you're particularly focused on. Let me give you another example. Have you ever had a problem and had a need and you went to somebody for advice and they just started going off in a completely different direction that frankly you're like, this isn't helpful at all. And then all of a sudden they said something unrelated to what your need was, but then it hits you like a thud in your heart. you knew, oh my gosh, it just gave me an idea. You just gave me an idea. And they weren't talking about anything. You know what that was? That was your reticular activator turned on. You're focused in solving a particular problem, and while you're talking to somebody or watching a TV program or listening to the radio about something completely unrelated to your particular problem, a solution emerges in your heart. It's not a mystery, it's not mysticism. It's your reticular activator at work. The question is, how strong or how weak is it? How strong or how long is the attention span in your brain? Again, you've got to be able to turn it on, tune it in, and then begin to develop it. One of the chapters in Persuade is called the Law of the Sixth Sense. There's really 3 topics within that chapter. The topic's what I call the tie, how to develop your sense of timing, intuition, and emotion. Let me give you another example of how you have already used your reticular activator, intentionally or not. In developing your emotional awareness, you've probably heard of the term before, emotional intelligence or EQ. Emotional intelligence is something that frankly you cannot be successful without. Emotional intelligence is a quality that is frankly intangible, but you cannot have success without it. In sales, in leadership, in teaching, in preaching, in any form of life that requires successful communication. What is emotional intelligence? It's the ability to understand the emotions going on in yourself and other people, in the environment around you, and then figure out how to leverage those into a productive end. But in order to pick up on those particular emotions that are happening around you, you've got to be able to turn on your emotional receiver and then tune into what people are saying. In my chapter about listening, I talk about tuning in to listen for specific things. Listen for context. Why are they saying what are they saying? Listen for connection. Based on what they're saying, how does that connect with something inside of you? Listen for the charge. When someone's communicating, what are they getting particularly animated about? Because when you can understand someone's pain or passion, you'll know what frankly turns them on or turns them off. But these are all things that you can tune into using your reticular activator, being able to learn about the environment around you, so you can use that information to learn yourself and frankly to better serve the people around you as well. One of the most important examples I want to give you, the reticular activator, is something that I think we can all leverage throughout our lives. If I look back on the last few decades of my life is filled with a lot of same things that yours is. Good and bad experiences, good and bad teachers, good and bad mentors, good and bad bosses, good and bad pastors. Imagine all the experiences we've had. We are not just limited to learn from the great experiences or the great teachers or mentors or great pastors or coaches in our lives. That would be very limiting. You can learn from the bad as well. It says that our memories can either become mentors or tormentors to us. Here's what that means. Every memory that you have, if it's a good memory, you want to learn from, why was it a good memory? What was the success that came from it? How can I reproduce it in my life? If it was a bad memory, instead of wallowing in the pain and maybe the hurt of that, you want to figure out how to turn that around. How can that torment become a tutor to you in a way where you can repurpose the pain to either help yourself or to help others? Your reticular activator will begin to trigger different memories at different times based on what you're focused on. So let me bring us back to center for just a moment. We're talking about Mentor Yourself University. At the heart of Mentor Yourself University is the willingness to take responsibility for developing your own success, because frankly, and I'm sorry you may not want to hear this, but no one's responsible for your success more than you. Nobody will be more vested in your success than you. Nobody will care about your success as much as you will. So you've got to take it by the reins. Your life may be filled with teachers. You may be in school right now, but nobody can teach you what you're not willing to learn. What I'm saying is that when you learn to turn on your reticular activator and leverage the learner that's already inside of you, you'll be able to maximize every learning experience, not just from the books on the shelves or the mentors or the classrooms that you sit in, but from your day-to-day experience as well. There's 3 quick examples I want to share with you to kind of close off our time together on Mentor Yourself University. There are 3 examples from my life that frankly have made all the difference. There's 3 different times in my life in what I would call 1, stationary time, 2, face-to-face time, and 3, running time. Let me explain what I mean by that. When I say stationary time, one of the most important ways that I mentor myself is how I start my day every morning. I start my day every morning with an area of inspiration in my life, with a book, with a notepad, where I'll begin to read in the wisdom of the ages. Now, it doesn't particularly matter which book you start with, whatever direction you're interested in learning with or learning from, pick that particular field and pick a mentor, pick a book, pick a YouTube video, pick a podcast or a TED Talk that inspires you, but always start your day with inspiration. I'm very careful not to start my day with things that just kind of get me into the day of running my race, but I want to fill my tank. So let me ask you this. What do you do each morning to fill your tank? So for me, I'm a man of faith. I start my day every day with doing devotions. I'll spend a few minutes in the scriptures. I'll write out my observations. I'll write out what connected with me. And I'll just kind of listen to my heart to see, how is this going to help me today? And sometimes I'll even ask myself a series of questions. And sometimes those questions are even for God. What do you want me to do with this? Because I'm always looking for something that connects with me. But that's how I start my day. I start my day with mentors and the wisdom of the ages that fills my tank. I call that stationary time. You're probably going to be sitting down the first hour or 2 after you wake up each morning. So while you're stationary, what can you do to leverage your mentoring time? The second time I want to talk to you about is what I call face-to-face time. This is some of the most valuable mentoring time. These are the people in your life that have invested in you, that have set time aside from you, that are willing to listen to you, that are willing to pour into you. When you're sitting with them one-on-one, how are you spending that time? Who do you spend that time with? There's a few people from my life when I was in my early 20s that invested in me that frankly, without their investment, I wouldn't have achieved what I did in sales. There were those in mentorship and in leadership that invested in me later in my 20s and into my 30s that frankly, without their help, I wouldn't become a good manager. There's writers and authors and publishers and speakers and teachers and pastors who have invested in me these last 20 years that frankly, without them, I wouldn't be a good author or speaker or writer. Whatever particular area that you're interested in learning and growing in your life, let me encourage you to seek out mentors in that area. You've heard the old saying before, you'll become like the 5 people you surround yourself with. That's really true, but here's the good news. The people you surround yourself with don't have to be people you necessarily have face-to-face access to. Sometimes they can be people on a bookshelf. In fact, the bookshelves are filled with thousands of mentors who have taken the wisdom that has taken them, frankly, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to learn, and they've put it into these books where just about anything that you want to learn, you can learn from a book. And let me tell you this, how you enter a book determines what you get out of the book. Again, I'm talking about the reticular activator system. So if you're focused on a particular area of learning, where you have a particular need in your life, that's what you're going to be able to hear, whether you're reading a book, whether you're sitting stationary, or whether you're sitting face-to-face with a mentor. But be careful who you pick as mentors. Be careful who you learn from, because who you learn from will impact and will, frankly, play a big part in your destiny. The Apostle Paul had this saying where he said, bad company corrupts good character. So who you hang out with, who you learn from, frankly, is going to rub off on you. That's true with adults. It's true with kids. We teach it to our kids, but we forget that as adults sometimes. In fact, I'll tell you kind of a unfun story. I once had somebody offer to mentor me who was very powerful and very high up in a field that I was interested in growing in. But I looked at their life and I looked at how they treated people, and knowing this principle that the Apostle Paul talked about, that we become the people we spend the most time with, I thought to myself, I don't want to learn from this person. I would hate to become like this person, so I politely declined the mentoring opportunity. Imagine that me, a personal growth nut, a mentor magnet who's always looking for someone to learn from, say no to somebody who said, Scott, I'd like to mentor you. But again, when I looked at their life and what they had to offer, I knew that principle that I'm going to become like the people I hang out with, and I didn't want that kind of investment. I didn't want those kinds of seeds planted in me, lest I risk them growing. The final time I want to share with you, and so far we've talked about face-to-face time, stationary time. The final time I want to talk to you about in terms of how to leverage a reticular activator, I would leverage it during what I called running time, running with mentors. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of people find personal growth sometimes to be a little bit boring, and it can be at times. Exercising can be boring too. But when you can find an inspiring speaker to listen or watch during your personal growth time while you're exercising, wow, talk about a dynamic combination. For years in my life, I would spend what I call time running with mentors. Here's what I would do. In fact, I'll tell you how it started off. I made this 40-day commitment to run 40 days straight no matter what. Now you may think, well, that's ridiculous. That's not even helpful. Gosh, Scott, if you want to get in shape or you want to lose weight, why would you commit to 40 days? There's something to when you do something 40 days in a row, you come out of that with power. You come out of that with a new level of commitment. And I had reached a point in my life where I needed a big change. So here's the commitment I made to myself. Come hell or high water, I was going to run for 40 days straight, no matter what happened. And while I did it, I was going to listen to some personal growth material. I discovered something as I was running with mentors every day, and as I was exercising, that I started to build some different kind of muscles and some different kind of habits. In fact, here's how it manifested. Every time at the beginning of a run, I would start my run focused on my goal was to remember only 2 or 3 things during a 45-minute run, commit them to memory, the things that impacted me. And then when I would get home from my run, I always kept a notepad in the garage. I would write those 2 or 3 things down very quickly before I would forget them. And then I would ask myself this one question: how does this apply to my life? That's when things inside of me would start to light up. Because even if I was learning in a direction that didn't necessarily impact me that day, if I could remember a couple things that resonated with me, that inspired me, because if it inspires you, it's inspiring you for a reason, I'd write it down and then figure out how to apply it to my life, maybe even how to teach other people. And boy, I was off to the races. Well, you do that enough, and what you start to realize is that the wisdom of the mentors that you spend time with doesn't just get deposited in you, but it also draws out of you the potential and the wisdom that's inside of you as you figure out how to repurpose or how to apply what you've learned to your life. So we've talked about stationary time, face-to-face time, and then running time. So let me ask you this: who are you learning from today? What mentors are you running with? If you're looking for a particular book, I guess as a salesperson, my job would be to convince you to buy a copy of Persuade. But remember how I talked to you about how mentorship was so important to me? There's a common theme of salesmanship, mentorship, and relationships all throughout all 7 chapters of Persuade. But there's one particular thing you'll see at the end of every chapter. It's what I call the CIA chapter. There's a dedicated few pages on just mentorship. And here's what it is. I've asked leaders from some of the greatest companies in America to give me their CIA at the end of every chapter. Here's what they did. They read the chapter and then they wrote down basically the C was what connected with them. And if it connected with them, they knew there was an insight. That's what the I was. They're going to share with you what connected with them, what their insights were, and then how they're applying that to their life. So who are these mentors that you're going to learn from in the last few pages of every chapter in Persuade? It's people from Hawaiian Airlines, from Facebook, from Microsoft, from Google, from Amazon, from Dell Computers, and many more. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video. One mentor simply is not enough. You've got to be able to learn from everybody, but in order to do that, you've got to be able to maximize your reticular activator by learning how to turn it on and then tune it in. Thank you very much.